Welcome to today's lecture on life in Nazi Germany. Today, we will be focusing on the question of how did life change for the youth in Nazi Germany. Firstly, we will examine the ways in which the school curriculum changed in order to indoctrinate the youth to Nazi ideology. Then we will study the Hitler Youth groups for boys and the youth groups for girls. Finally, we will examine how life changed for the youth during World War II. Firstly, let's consider why the youth were important to the Nazi Party. There is a saying, which originated from the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, that states, "Give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man." Essentially what this means is that your very early years of life shape your beliefs and mindset. Therefore, the Nazi Party placed education and social policies for the youth at the forefront of their agenda. The main way in which the Nazi Party could indoctrinate the youth was through the school curriculum. In other words, what is taught within schools. The Nazi ideology infiltrated all subjects, even maths puzzles were worded in a way to influence the political beliefs of the young. However, some subjects saw a major overhaul that was more than just a manipulation of facts. They presented lies and conspiracy theories as truth. History is the subject that was most clearly Nazified. For example, children learnt about the so-called First and Second Reichs. These were two eras of history when Germany was part of a powerful empire. The first era was when Germany was part of the Holy Roman Empire, which covered most of Central Europe from the 1st to the 19th century. The second era was what we call the Kaiser years, from when Germany unified in 1871 and when the Kaiser was forced to abdicate in 1918. Furthermore, the stab in the back theory was taught as fact when the students learnt about the events of World War I, as it was the only way to justify Germany's defeat. It helped to reinforce the conspiracy that the Weimar Republic, known as the November Criminals, were evil and betrayed Germany by signing the armistice in November 1918. The other subject that received a major overhaul was biology. The Nazi Party taught a form of social Darwinism called eugenics. This taught that the Aryan or German race was superior to other races and the Slavic and Jewish races were unto-mention or inferior races. This idea of social hierarchy was also taught across other areas of science and biology, with an emphasis on the survival of the fittest and the predator being more powerful than the prey. In this way, schools were slowly and steadily preparing children to accept the horrific ethnic cleansing that would take place during World War II. The Nazis also sought to control universities because they could easily become a hotbed for protest and dissent. Between 1933 and 1934, 15% of university lecturers were fired from their posts due to their political beliefs or their racial profile. By 1939, approximately 3,000 had been dismissed. Other leading academics left the country, in search of a place where they could practice freedom of thought. Now let's examine the different youth groups that were hosted by the Nazi Party. The most famous of these was the Hitler Youth, which was founded in 1926 for teenage boys aged 14 to 18. However, there were other groups for both boys and girls of all ages. These groups were not too dissimilar in principle to scout groups, and there were many similar activities, such as camping and parades. However, they were used to indoctrinate the youth to Nazi ideology and to control their free time. Little Fellows was the organization for boys aged 6 to 10 years old. They had to swear an oath to the Führer and engaged in activities that were both fun and preparing them for their future role within the Reich. This includes parades, short camping trips and singing patriotic songs. Once the boys reached the age of 10, they joined the Young Folk group. This intensified their training. They would attend large rallies and parades and begin to perform military drills. They would also undertake longer hiking and camping expeditions. This training prepared them for the realities of being on the front line of a war. At the age of 14, There was a strong expectation that teenage boys joined the Hitler Youth, where they were expected to attend sessions several times a week. Some boys even attended military drills before school. They would attend monthly camping trips and parades. They were given rifle and knife training as part of the Hitler Youth. They were also encouraged to play war games that stimulated the battlefield. These included some dangerous practices, like jumping over fires. By this point, the indoctrination into the Nazi regime was far less subtle. The aim was for these young men to be ready for conscription into the army when they reached the age of 18. Hitler made no secret of his intention to use the youth groups to prepare the boys for war. In a 1938 speech he said, "These boys enter our organizations with their 10 years of age, and often for the first time get a little fresh air. After 4 years of the young folk they go on to the Hitler Youth, where we have them for another 4 years. And even if they are still not complete National Socialists, they go to labor service and are smoothed out there for another 6 to 7 months. And whatever class consciousness or social status might still be left, the army will take care of that." Let's now examine the youth groups for girls. Once again, the main purpose of these groups was to indoctrinate girls and young women to the Nazi ideology. Essentially, it became training for girls to become homemakers and mothers. The girls started their training by joining the young girls at the age of 10. There they would take place in sporting activities such as swimming and athletics. They were also taught home economics, such as cookery and sewing. They were also expected to go around their community asking for charitable donations, similar to the stereotypical girl guide selling cookies on the doorsteps of neighbors. These activities subtly prepared them for their roles as mothers, as they were taught that physical fitness was important, that a good woman was charitable and devout, and that she should keep a clean and well-organized home. From the age of 14, the training for girls intensified, as they joined the League of German Maidens, or the BDM. The teenage girls were expected to go on camping trips where they would go hiking and sing folk songs. This was to instill a strong sense of traditional values into the young women. They also undertook a number of physical sporting activities, especially athletics, like javelin and gymnastics. This was not only to promote the physical prowess of young Aryan women, but also to promote fertility, which was strongly associated with physical fitness. At the age of 18, some young women then joined the Faith and Beauty Society, which was a stepping stone into adult life, and provided more intense training on how to serve your husband as the ideal wife. This is a poster promoting the German League of Maidens, or BDM, from September 1934. You can see from the girls' posture that there was a clear emphasis on athleticism and strength, both to show the power of the Aryan race and to promote fertility. Many teenage girls would have aspired to have this type of physique, so would have wished to participate in the activities. Therefore, in many ways, this poster is not too dissimilar to the types of images young women now see on social media that promote a certain body type. Let's now examine the impact that World War II had on the youth of Germany. Most fathers were conscripted into the army, which meant that the children had to step up and complete household chores, either to help their mothers or, if living in a rural area, to assist with farming activities like the harvest. However, as the war continued, there were higher expectations placed on the youth. A month before the war broke out in 1939, the Nazi regime set up a program of so-called defense training for all members of the Hitler Youth. This ramped up the amount of military training they undertook. By 1942, members were sent to training camps, away from home. By the mid-1940s, the Allies were bombing the northern industrial cities. Members of the Hitler Youth were therefore expected to join the fire brigade and repair the city after a night of attacks. This required them to extinguish fires, enter the rubble of destroyed buildings and risk explosions from gas attacks to save civilian lives. By 1944, the Nazis had lost a tremendous number of men. They were also losing the war. Therefore, members of the Hitler Youth were recruited into active combat. Approximately 20,000 members of the Hitler Youth took part in the defense of D-Day, which was when the Allied powers landed on the beaches of Normandy to overthrow the Nazi occupation of France. Of these 20,000, at least 3,000 died. The situation deteriorated even further by 1945, and boys as young as 12 were drafted into the army to defend against the advances of the Soviet and American forces. Girls were also expected to do their part. As the war advanced, more young girls became part of auxiliary staff, such as radio operators and office staff. This is because all men fit for service were called to the front, and so there was a large number of vacancies in administrative roles. The one thing that the girls were never asked to do was engage in direct combat or handle weaponry. Despite the huge shortages by the end of the war, the Nazi Party never allowed for this. As the war advanced, more young girls became part of auxiliary staff, such as radio operators and office staff. This is because all men fit for service were called to the front, and so there was a large number of vacancies in administrative roles. The one thing that the girls were never asked to do was engage in direct combat or handle weaponry. Despite the huge shortages by the end of the war, the Nazi Party never allowed for this. Let's now return to the overarching question of how did life change for the youth in Nazi Germany? Firstly, there was a radical overhaul of the school curriculum. All subjects underwent Nazification so that they aligned with Nazi ideology. Boys were expected to join the Hitler Youth by the age of 14, with many joining the young folk and little fellows beforehand. There they were given games and activities that prepared them for becoming soldiers in the German army. Girls were also expected to join youth groups from the age of 10, such as the League of German Maidens. They then underwent activities that prepared them for motherhood and ensured they were physically fit for childbearing. Life changed for the youth in a significant way during World War II, especially for the boys. They were expected to risk their lives, firstly as part of the fire brigade and then as part of the army. Boys as young as 12 were expected to fight by the end of the war. Thank you for watching. Tune into my other lectures to learn about the ways in which other social groups were affected by Nazi social policies.